Greetings, Hempster. Thank you for tuning in to another Hempisode of HempAware Radio, where we focus on what's most hemportant. Today's Hempisode is content marketing for hemp entrepreneurs and companies. And if you have a hemp company and you need help getting more traffic or sales, or if you're wanting to redesign your website or redesign your brand, and especially if you're wanting to attract those ideal customers and walk them through your sales process, we'd love to talk. Just visit HempAware.com and we can help get your sales funnels set up, SEO strategy, and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So anyway, I'm thankful and excited to dive into today's show, as this topic is one of the most valuable ways to attract your ideal customers and delight them over and over. One of the biggest things we focus on here at HempAware are free methods of marketing. And as you know, a lot of hemp and cannabis companies struggle with paid media and paid ways of getting customers. So it's always good to have a solid foundation of free organic methods of marketing and generating traffic and sales to your hemp products and campaigns. And so to help me share this valuable method is a company based out of the UK, the United Kingdom, Britain, as they say. They actually specialize in content creation for hemp companies, and they've established their position in the industry as one of the top content creation outlets. And so I'm really excited to talk to Thermidor. The website's Thermidor, Thermidor.wtf. And what they do is help hemp cannabis companies create content that essentially cuts through the noise and adds tremendous value to their visitors and prospects and customers that are coming to your website. So in a hemp nutshell, Thermidor is a content-led creative agency whose aim is to create intelligent conversation through cannabis content. And they also aim to challenge social stigmas and make cannabis mainstream and celebrate cannabis culture. So thank you so much for being on today's show, Dave and Jamie with Thermidor. Appreciate your guys' presence and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much, sir. I feel that's a very generous intro. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah,
that was great.
I mean, it's lovely to hear someone else say,
absolutely,
say what we kind of preach a lot. It's nice to hear someone else say it, and yeah, it felt very grand. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
We strive to reflect the things that are working and really support our listeners, the hemp entrepreneurs of the world. And so appreciate you being here. And yeah, give us a little bit of background, maybe. Jamie, if you want to start, what is your kind of area of expertise? I know you're an expert marketer and you were led to cannabis at one point. Tell us a little bit about that journey in the Hemp Nutshell.
Oh, okay. I've got to try and sum it up, haven't I? That's always a challenge. But no, my background is, I started out operations and I moved over to marketing after not too much time, and then kind of transitioned to commercial. Pretty much work just in B2B environments, and Dave and myself, we've known each other for about 4 years, and we started working together. Dave has another agency dedicated to content for tech, and kind of got involved working with him and doing copywriting and trying to help out brands in lots of different ways, with kind of creative content, not just the copy. And then slowly but surely, Thermidor sort of developed. Dave had been working on it before I sort of had involvement in it, and we saw an opportunity to be able to kind of help each other with it and work on it together. It's both something we're passionate about. We're both passionate about cannabis. Hemp is a part of that, but cannabis in broad sense, we think it has a lot of benefits for a lot of different people, and the fact that there are a lot of therapeutic benefits, whether or not you're whatever kind of market you're talking about. And in the case of hemp, it's therapeutic for the planet in a lot of instances. So I suppose that's our angle. We're very keen to try and tear down some of those stigmas, as you mentioned, and get people just talking about it more. Not everyone is necessarily going to like it, not everyone's going to love it, but I think if we keep things in the shadows, it makes them a lot more difficult to bridge as topics and to evolve them as an industry.
It's never dull. That's the thing. It's never dull. Always something interesting going on. Always some big question around what's happening there, or, so we can do that here, but not over there. In the global markets and things, how things are evolving, in the US and in Europe and elsewhere. It's just it's always something to keep us on your toes. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's an exciting industry, and thank you for sharing that, Jamie. Dave, what's a little bit expand on your background and kind of what inspired you to do hemp cannabis?
Well, I think in a nutshell, I mean, I hit 40 and sort of started questioning what was kind of missing from my life, and I think lo and behold, it was in broader terms sort of cannabis, really. I mean, as Jamie said, very passionate about the plants, always enjoyed it, in just kind of seeing what was happening in, particularly in the US and Canada, and seeing how, wow, it's actually kind of recreationally legal and medical legal. What's medical legal? And I think, I just started exploring it more and more. And again, it was trying to put the skill set that I have into something, around cannabis, basically. I mean, I've been writing probably for more years than I care to remember, more like 17 or something like that. I started out on B2B PR, and I went freelance and started this other agency that I work on, sort of tech focused, probably around 5-6 years ago now, and just sort of things sort of built up from there, really. And like I say, I've been working with Jamie and with a few others, and we had a kind of good thing going on, and I kind of thought, okay, right, I'll start to look and see how we can kind of move into the sort of the burgeoning cannabis space. And it turned out Jamie was just as passionate about it as I am, and I think that was really the impetus. It was kind of like doing more and more, and it was like, oh, hey, we should probably do this as like a partnership. And I think we have very complementary skill set. I think Jamie was there being very he's a real jack of all trades. I think he's pretty much good at anything he can turn his hand to, and I'm just the sort of crazy old man sort of sat in the ivory tower sort of coming up with ideas. So
well, you guys have a very clean way of presenting yourselves, and you definitely, I can tell, come from a professional background, so you've honed your skills, and but also have a wide understanding of what it means to be an entrepreneur, and so you guys have niched down into specifically serving cannabis companies in the topic of content creation, which there's plenty of cannabis and hemp companies that need content, because that's sort of the bread and butter of organic search. And,
It is. It's really interesting. And then again, you look at all the kind of, I think for me, it's sort of the idea of like we can't advertise it, or there's kind of restrictions around what you can and what you can't do. And I was thinking, well, there's a kind of, again, like you say, that there's the stigma aspect, and then there's a kind of like, well, there's a challenging bit. Okay, what can we do? How much can we push up against the boundaries of what is permissible from a kind of marketing perspective? How can and just kind of trying to think around those ideas. And I think that's where, content really has a part to play. I mean, you only have to go creative on different the social channels and seeing, different videos and how people are doing stuff like that, and, blogs, and, just, I think we started out just kind of creating the content that we wanted to see, wanting it to be fun as well as engaging, as well as kind of, informative. And I think that's what, we're trying to do with both Thermidor and our own podcast, the Lobster Pop. And just talk to people and learn stuff, and just like I say, just do what we would like to do, and hopefully, and we're starting to see it, people will pay us to do something similar for them as well, because I think it's there's no shortage of things to talk about when it comes to cannabis and hemp.
Yeah, and I think it's important to present that information in a digestible way, and sounds like you guys are good listeners, like get the boiling pot going and really understand your clients. So as far as, starting this hemp venture or cannabis venture, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you've dealt with, or that you've seen some of your clients facing, in this industry?
I think when it comes to creating the content, the clients struggle with the things you mentioned, right at the top. Those social media is such a huge part of marketing in the modern world, that not being able to have the same kind of level of access, or the same ability to lean on it as you can in other industries, is a real challenge for clients. I suppose from our perspective as a creative, sort of content creative, a creative content agency, the thing that's difficult for us at the moment is the fact that the market is so burgeoning in Europe, which obviously is where we're based in the UK. And that means that at the moment it's very nascent, so there aren't that many players, whereas obviously as in North America it's considerably more sort of mature. It's like at that kind of adolescent stage, or early adolescence, I would say. And that means that
ironic. Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, Jamie, but I mean, I remember, when hemp was illegal, cannabis was illegal back in 2005, and I had the opportunity to travel to England and, Germany, Spain, Netherlands, France, and all that. And I was finding hemp in stores and, museums, going to, the Hans House and the Cannabis College of Amsterdam, and like all these hemp and cannabis related outlets. And it totally inspired me to bring it back to the States. But, you're right. Like since 2018, the onslaught and burgeoning of hemp companies starting in the States has, blossomed, to say the least. But I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to mention that, it's kind of coming full circle.
No, absolutely. I mean, with particular focus on hemp, because hemp has its own kind of branding challenge as it's cannabis, but it isn't. If put it in a really kind of basic way, it is cannabis, but it isn't as far as hemp companies are concerned, and as far as they want to be seen, because it's predominantly being used in an industrial capacity, whether or not it's in building or in textiles, whatever you're using it for. And but because the regulations surrounding cannabis as a plant are a lot more lenient in certain states within the US and other parts of the world outside of Europe, it means that investment and money flowing into it as an industry is a lot more prevalent. And what that's allowed essentially the industry to do is develop all the different parts of it. The thing that we really have a problem with in the UK is that we don't have enough processing areas for hemp, and it's a real chicken and egg thing. No one wants to grow hemp because there's nowhere to process it, but it's trying to figure out that balance. So that's kind of where we are in I suppose terms of us as an agency and what we've seen from clients. There's a lag here, and I think it is changing, but it does need that kind of investment into infrastructure to make it happen.
Indeed, I totally agree. Did you have any thoughts on that, Dave, as far as some of the biggest challenges or struggles?
I think as Jamie sort of said, really, it's just kind of trying to figure out. I think there's a lot of people in across the business, trying to sort of. I mean, we were in Germany in ICBC Berlin back in July. Was it July? Yeah, I think it was. And again, there was a lot of people from the US kind of sort of sniffing around, thinking, okay, Germany's going to go recreational legal soon. What does that mean? There's no kind of, but again, it's interesting. There's no kind of precedent set here in Germany. There's no kind of sort of there's obviously a medical market, I think, over there. But again, you get the sense that, companies that are kind of coming online for recreational in particular, I think, because that feels like it feels like it's kind of more of an industry that, other companies can embrace. It feels like, you're basically having to start something from scratch. And that's really interesting. And I think, again, priorities of a lot of companies who are sort of, there's different priorities. Marketing or content marketing in particular is, well, arguably I think it should be kind of one of the sort of things, to help build that brand. But I think, it's navigating all of the other complexities, the compliance, the legality and things like that, and what you can and can't do, and kind of adhering to different rules, and like what percentage of THC can you have if you're importing, from different countries, or can you import? You have to kind of grow it. I mean, again, they released sort of dossier this week talking about what will happen in Germany. There was a kind of that leak earlier, so it was last week actually, wasn't it? And now they're talking about, okay, well, this is what could happen, and it's the real sense of, well, nobody really knows until it's a thing, and I think we still don't know to what extent certain European countries, recreational sort of cannabis is going to be a thing. And I think for us, and it's good to see that, hemp sort of leads the way, medical cannabis kind of the way. I think I keep reading lots of stuff on LinkedIn, people talking about this kind of Trojan horse effect, and, it's coming in with medical, but sort of waiting for the moment to strike to kind of get into the kind of recreational market.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's that uncertainty, isn't it? And it's kind of dealing with that uncertainty, and, what should you do to get that kind of first mover advantage? I think that's what a lot of companies, that's the sense I get, are sort of struggling with in some respects. But it's an interesting challenge. Yeah.
Agree. You're methodology for content creation and what you mentioned, Jamie, about this bottlenecking of certain abilities to grow in these niches. Cannabis hemp is forcing companies to be more grassroots about their marketing approach. And so content creation is a solid backbone to supplying leads and generating quality content to supply along that entire buying journey of their customers. So when it comes to creating content, what would you say are most hemp companies are doing wrong, like when it comes to actually creating content for their brands or for their website, if it's a blog post or maybe social media? What like a pointer that you could help them with?
Yeah, sure. I wouldn't necessarily put it down as something wrong, but I think there's always an opportunity to improve at that people do to differing degrees, and people who aren't doing it definitely should be, is involving people that you work with. So having a community, not necessarily community focus, but either be it suppliers or customers or people that in the industry, involve them in the work that you're doing. So write pieces about them, or write pieces that might them, and tag them in them, and that's where you can almost leverage. Certainly, if you look at LinkedIn as a platform, you can leverage the fact that it's a professional services platform effectively, and you don't really have to be talking about hemp overtly, or cannabis, although it seems to do okay on the platform.
It's very cannabis friendly, actually.
It is. But you can go on there and you can start building out a network, and you can start building out a community of people who are going to be responsive to that content, or at least engaged by it, if it sparks a discussion or anything like that. And what that can create is relationships down the road where people are aware that you have an awareness of stuff, and they might want to involve you professionally in helping them, or perhaps they have an event and they'd like you to speak, or they want advice on something. And I think trying to reach out and connect and slowly build out that network is probably one of the things that companies can do best, and that not every company does do.
I totally agree. Word of mouth is so underestimated, and I totally agree with what you said. Dave, did you have a thought on that as well?
No, I think, what Jamie says is, bang on the money. I think it's really a case, I would say more companies just need to kind of do stuff. I think that's the thing, and just kind of thinking outside the box a bit more. And it's like, I think we've written a few blog posts recently talking about, well, what can you do? There might be all these restrictions, but, it's like you see on Facebook, you see all these kind of videos of people just kind of doing stuff, or they might be showcasing like a process they're doing in a factory. Why not use that opportunity? You're processing hemp or something like that to show people how it's done. It kind of engages people, and it might seem, those kind of little aspects might seem, oh, that's just something we do every day. That's part of our job. But, why not include those sort of things? Why not showcase what you're doing? Give people, sort of open up what you're doing to the world, and kind of use that as an advantage. It's easy to take for granted when you're in something that the rest of the world's going to sort of either understand it innately or not find it interesting. But, I would argue the contrary. I think there's plenty of opportunities for content creation, and I think it's the case of, just start doing something. And, as Jamie said, the impact might not be immediate, but it's that kind of slow build, it's a slow burn, for one of the better term. No pun, pun fully intended, actually. When it comes to cannabis, I think, I've been in sort of B2B content marketing for, however many years. And, it's really a case of, what you hear a lot is that you need to have about 7 different brand engagements from a kind of customer before they sort of consider buying from you. Because I guess, talking about like a SaaS platform or something, for example, you're not selling like a chocolate bar, they're going to spend a fair amount of money, the customer, with your business. And they need to be assured that you know what you're doing, that you know what you're talking about. They want to see evidence that you're actual people, or that, you have mastery of some sort of process or whatever it might be. And I think people just need to, or people in hemp and cannabis and any industry really, need to kind of use that to their advantage and go, well, let's just start talking about what we know best. And, and that sets a precedent for, convincing others that, they do know what they're talking about. They are experts, and not to be afraid to show that expertise. I think that's
number one,
really going to help shake things out.
Exactly. So involve others, engage them, tag them, create content with them, kind of involve your customers if you can, having them send pictures using your product if you can, and collaborating on the content creation. LinkedIn, you mentioned, is a canna-friendly platform, which is good to know. And really, this is about creating long-term relationships. So, just involving people in that process, and doing that more often, they'll remember you at a future time, whether it's they need advice or they're, you're doing an event and they hear about it, or, and then lastly, you said documenting. If maybe you don't have customer spotlight or, testimonials, you can do documenting your process, showing people how you make your product, and just getting them involved, letting them ask questions and documenting your process and your product. So I appreciate those tips. That's really helpful. So what would you say are some of the best forms of content for hemp companies and cannabis companies? Like, is it social posts? Is it podcasts? Is it blogs?
I think there's a differing, as they very rightly pointed out, the fact that it's a slow burn. Content, SEO, these things are all things that take time to build, and they will build if you're consistent with them. That's really the key thing. When it comes to differing forms of content, you're going to get differing levels of engagement on different things. So if you put up a 30-second video that looks a lot more interesting on the surface than maybe a 4,000-word industry investigation, you're probably going to get more traction on it in the short term, because it's something that people can engage with very quickly as they're going about their day. It's not going to take up a lot of their time to kind of digest it. But equally, if you want to create, as Dave said, the content that you kind of want to see or to demonstrate your ability or your expertise, then you need to create content that is true to what you're trying to do. So it wouldn't really make sense for, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example. If you had a hemp processing business somewhere, a hemp processing plant, they weren't growing, but they were bringing material in, processing it, and then sending it out. It wouldn't make a huge amount of sense for them to roll, I don't know, kind of like stock footage and look maybe like everyone else. Like, it would make sense for them to try and differentiate themselves in some way and not veer away from social media platforms that maybe they think aren't right for them. So if you look at TikTok, it's now pretty much ubiquitous as a platform. Those sorts of companies can dive on there and immediately get traction, because there aren't a lot of other companies in their position doing it, because they don't feel like, oh, we're B2B, we're industrial. This probably isn't. That's actually not the case at all. There really is a space for those businesses on those platforms. So I think it's not shying away from the options that you do have and the things you can use, especially with the limitations surrounding cannabis, and just using them to your advantage, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I would sort of second that, if I may. I think a lot of, when it comes to kind of sort of disciplines of sort of marketing, etc., it's all about understanding your customer, what's going to, move the needle, what's going to get them interested, what's going to engage them, and what's important to them. And I think when you're putting together content, written content or video or whatever, it's understanding, what problems do your ideal customers face? What can you, and how can you present yourself as the solution, but at the same time as putting them front and center. And I think that is something that can inform a broader sort of strategy. So again, the content becomes the way of presenting your brand, but at the same time, it needs to be related to something that is important to your target customers. So it's thinking around, okay, well, we're a content marketing agency specialized in cannabis. Who do we want to serve? We want to serve, companies right across the sort of cannabis spectrum. We did a campaign recently trying to target sort of tech-focused companies in the cannabis space, because obviously that's something we've done a lot of, tech itself. So it's like, how do we showcase what we're doing? And then I think our approach was, well, let's, demonstrate that we know what we're talking about and that we understand the pain points of companies like this. And, but let's make it fun. Let's do something slightly different as well. So we created like a crazy little 30-second video that, we used a voiceover guy who's quite well known here in the UK, and we just kind of put a bunch of GIFs together, and it was I think it's just a fun sort of thing. But again, it was thinking about the strategy. There was it was a landing page, it was an email campaign to sort of point people to the landing page, thinking about, well, we want the site and get a feel for what once they're there. So I think again, it's about that sort of strategy that balances what you want to be known as a company, and what your customers will need from you. And I think, again, it's an interesting balance, and there's a lot of refinement in those sort of processes. And I think that's why a lot of people are looking at statistics, data, open rates, and things like that, which is important. But at the same time, it's thinking about, well, if you do want to stand out, you've got to do something different. And I'm very much a proponent of that school of thought.
Yeah, it's like that vesicus Pisces, that overlapping, the Venn diagram, like what are the problems and challenges and worries and struggles of your ideal customers, and what is that overlap of your expertise, talents, resources, and abilities as a service, as a company or a product. And that's, the kind of harmony of what branding is. It's what your customers think about you and experience about you, as well as what you think about yourself. And so, what you're saying is completely on point. And I think it segues actually right into my next question, which was, how do you guys differentiate yourselves from other agencies that are offering similar services? And I think Dave did a good job of explaining that essentially just a moment ago. And, being really thinking outside of the box and really understanding your customer and what's important to them, and using language that engages and draws them into an experience. And I think you guys are off to a really great start. And, there's a lot of need for this. I think it's an essential marketing strategy for any cannabis company. But yeah, did you want to add anything else on there as far as like differentiation or, uniquely positioning yourself in the market as a company, either one of you?
I think as a brand, Thermidor is pretty out there, for want of a better word. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it's quite funky. It's very different to a lot of the other people that we see. But I think more than it just being different for the sake of it, it does actually speak a lot to the sort of Dave and my approach and I suppose viewpoint and the way we like to work. So when we actually are dealing with people, we deal with them in a similar tone that you'll see in the way we communicate online. And I think that's a big part of it, is the fact that we're actually true to what we're saying. We're not pretending to be all zany and random and weird for the sake of it. We are a bit odd, both of us, in I think a good way. I hope a good way.
No,
but
I think so.
It's definitely an honest thing. People, it'll be very clear very quickly that we're not sort of, I suppose, your run-of-the-mill, dull, churn-out articles kind of agency, if that's what you're thinking from the start. So I think what we've tried to do is create an image and continue strengthening that image in, I suppose, in mirroring the way we want to be perceived and the way we feel we are.
Yeah, no, big time. I think so. I think that's really I think Jamie's absolutely right. I think it's a case of, well, you've got to kind of draw your line in the sand somewhere and say, okay, this is who we want to be, this is who we want to serve, and let's see if there's a need for it. But I think at the same time, it's really a case of, well, this industry, the plant itself, it does so many amazing things, but it's also fun, and let's try and infuse some of that and get that balance of the fun with the kind of seriousness, as in the impact of it. And I always, from having done B2B stuff, I always think, similar rule applies in kind of B2B content as well. And, B2B doesn't mean boring to bullshit. We can learn a lot from how B2C brands present themselves. Like consumer brands and things like that. And
because B2B is still body to body. It's
Absolutely.
a person-to-person
you need that
experience,
flavor.
and so it's about the overall tone and where you're coming from and your overall unique, perspective that you offer. So, I appreciate that. And the industry is growing, and more companies are going to be needing this type of service. Would you say overall the industry is getting easier to market in, cannabis and hemp, or do you find it being more restrictive, or like which direction do you guys feel it's going? I realize that's speculative, but obviously content creation is essential whichever direction it's going. But what is your opinion on that?
I think that there is increasing leniency just because that's the way that the law is developing in pretty much all parts of the world. But I think also the thing that becomes easier is everything that has existed becomes a known quantity to an extent. And there isn't, if you look at the start of the kind of cannabis industry in North America, it was the Wild West. It's a very, very fluid situation. Whereas now we're at a point where lots of things are known, and because they're known, they become standardized, which make them quicker to execute. And a good example of that is social media, knowing where the friendly platforms are, knowing what you can and can't say. Yes, there are still bans that come out of nowhere, things like that, but there are starting to be some kind of rules and a visible framework, and that just makes operating in the space easier, both for clients in what they want to achieve, but also for agencies in what they want to deliver. So I would say it's getting easier from the fact that it has been done more, and there is a growing market, and the fact that there is a growing market because laws are becoming more lenient and more liberal and progressive.
Yeah, Dave?
Yeah, I think Jamie's right. I think also what I think we need to do as an industry is kind of push up against those rules. And I think I mentioned it earlier. It's just, what can we do? What's permissible? I mean, I saw something recently. Someone was talking about, people use the broccoli emoji as the kind of metaphor for cannabis and kind of, emoji parlance, what you want to call it. And that seems to be, but someone was calling out saying, why can't we just let's talk openly about being cannabis? And, because it's authentic. And I think there's lots of debate around what you can and can't do and, what's permissible. But why not? Why not just try something out and see if it works? I think happened recently? Was it Cookies did a big a mural in one of the New York stores or something like that? And it was like, well, you can't advertise cannabis like that. And it's like, well, no, we just got a store that sells things that or sells, CBD products or something like that. We're not sort of flagrantly advertising cannabis. It's like, okay, well, that's the smart thing to do, actually. Test the waters, push the boundaries, and learn how to cover your backside if you need to. But at the same time, why not just go out there and say, well, we're not actually doing anything wrong. We're just, being creative around the rules. And I think that's where a lot of creativity shines, actually. Having these kind of weird restrictions to kind of navigate and say, well, it gives you something to kind of push up against, or sandbox to play in, doesn't it? It gives you those parameters. It doesn't necessarily have to be like the weirdest thing ever. It's like, well, what can we get away with? And I think that's, and I think there's quite, again, the cannabis hemp sector is, well, there's a lot of rebels, aren't there, actually?
Fringe,
so
yeah.
I'm sure people unafraid to make a stand on things. And I think let's harness some of that. And that's why that would be my thing to say to companies, harness some of that and just don't be afraid to kind of go out there and just go, well, this is us, this is what we think. And, so I think that's an interesting way to look at things.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I definitely think that the industry is becoming more lenient and more friendly, and more platforms are, accepting hemp and cannabis as what it is, this, true gift of life that can provide our food, shelter, clothing, energy, plastics, fuel, medicine, and 25,000 other things. So, you can't hide that for too long in a world that's completely connected like this. There's still those in sectors that are still trying to outlaw and banish and ban and, destroy and get rid of cannabis and hemp. But more and more people are becoming aware of the truth of what this plant is capable of providing humanity. And, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. It's super essential. Content is king, as they say, in the digital marketing world. But I am curious, as a sort of side note. So your website ends with .wtf. I have not seen that before. Can you explain that?
Should I take this one?
Go for it, Dave. Go for it.
I think, well, again, our sister company is TBC.wtf, and again, the whole idea was, trying to have something again that was memorable, that was stood out, that people would question. So the fact you're questioning it is evidence enough that people go, can you do that? Does that exist? Is that a thing? Well, yeah, it's a thing. And it's and again, I think it fits with the kind of again, I was looking, well, trying to set something up. What could we use? Because the whole load of kind of domain kind of endings that seem to have sort of blossomed. There's lots of random ones, and I just thought this was a cool one. And again, because not many people are using it, there's more just single words available.
I didn't even realize WTF was an option. Is it literally short for the vulgar expression?
I believe so. I believe so, I guess. But again, have a bit of ambiguity, and what could it mean, So yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Well, how can our listeners find out more about you guys and engage with your company or brand? Like, what would you suggest they do to follow you and get in touch with you?
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, they can head to the site, Thermidor.wtf. We have a podcast that's available on a bunch of different platforms, probably ones that they listen to. The podcast is called The Lobster Pot. We do a news roundup every week. We do sort of thought leadership, or at least attempt to be thought leadership pieces surrounding cannabis and brand and content creativity. And we do all that on LinkedIn. So we're in all the kind of places you'd expect to find us. So please reach out.
Right on. That's Thermidor. Dave and Jamie, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Are there any final thoughts, or if if there was one big clue or hint or tip that you can leave with all the hemp entrepreneurs out there, what would that be?
Just start doing stuff. Don't think about it for too long.
Yep, absolutely. Just go out there, make a noise, and people will listen. I think
right on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your wisdom and knowledge and sharing, and I look forward to continuing our relationship and working with you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into HempAware Radio. This is your hemp-entrepreneurial host, Tyler Hemp, here to empower your hemposphere because it's important. Check him out, Thermidor.wtf. Thanks again for being on the show, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, Tyler. Thank you for having us. It was great.
All right.
Thank you.
Peace
Cheers.
out, everyone.
Thanks.
All the best.